This is Chris Thiede, the managing editor of Comarch Magazine, and I'm here with Stephen Jacobs. Mr. Jacobs, I wondered if you could start off just by kind of introducing yourself, telling us who you're with and the kind of work that you do.
Sure. I'm sort of the founding principal of the Stephen B. Jacobs Group, which was founded in 1967, so we're in our 53rd year of practice. Our work sort of revolves out of residential projects of all kinds and descriptions, from government-assisted affordable housing to the most expensive apartments in the city, from 2- and 3-story buildings or single-family houses outside of the city to 50-, 60-story buildings in New York. We're also very active in the hospitality and what is called the adaptive reuse field, that is finding new uses for old buildings. So we were very early in what is described as the lifestyle of boutique hotel industry. We did some of the earliest projects completed in New York City, including 60 Thompson, the Library, the Giraffe, the Gainesville, the Meatpacking District, Gainesville Park, and so on. So that's more or less the bulk of our work, although every once in a while we look to projects that are not what we do every day.
Okay. So let's get into it. I mean, as you and I are speaking here today, it is the 21st of May, 2020. And many parts of the country are, well, really the whole country and many parts of the world are still dealing with the COVID-19 shutdown and so forth. And one thing I want to talk about is the role of architects, you know, as we start to open up perhaps our society a little bit more and go back to work and go back to, you know, other things, other buildings that we've used in the past besides our homes. It seems to me that architects will play an important role in kind of helping the people who occupy and the people who own those buildings adapt. I guess talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So architects as a whole get a very broad education. Unlike many other professional fields, there is no specific education towards specialization during your educational process. So in effect, you could say that architects are sort of general practitioners, where they're really trained to do any kind of project. And that training really consists of, if somebody asks you to do something you've never done before, how you go about learning what you need to know of that particular building type or business, so that you can then proceed to do meaningful, rational buildings. Now that training and that mindset is very well suited for what's necessary today, because we are really embarking on the unknown. Nobody really knows what ultimately is going to happen, how it's going to happen, how it's going to affect the way we work, the way we live, the way we travel. But you know, a lot of people are making predictions. Some of them are probably realistic, maybe others aren't. So I think starting from a point of view of, without having any preconceived notions about what you're going to end up doing, a lot of clients have asked me, for example, when I start a project, well, what is it going to be? What is it going to be? And I said, well, you know, if I knew what it was going to be, that'd be very easy. But in fact, design is a process. And the process of design is like peeling the skins of an onion. And one thing leads to another. And that's how you do meaningful, intelligent things. So the things that we need to look at today is reevaluate almost every type of building. And so we have to do this in terms of what's necessary for the immediate future, which is right now. There's potentially new clusters, new outbreaks. We don't have a vaccine. And we have to assume that, maybe for as long as the next year or year and a half, this is something that we have to learn to live with. And that means, for example, if you going to go into office space, for example, and by the way, it's easy to predict to say, well, offices are going to get smaller or offices are going to get bigger or whatever. The fact is that the reality is that people have leases and they have this space and they may have to stay within that space. So the way we're approaching this in our own firm, and we haven't reached definitive conclusions, but what we're doing is we are planning to have, and of course we haven't reopened because until the governor permits us to do that, we have no intention of doing it. But when we do reopen, it's going to be a slow process. And perhaps we're going to end up with no more than 50% of the people that are in the office at any one time. Another thing that we've learned through this process, is that working remotely has turned out better than I thought it was going to be. Of course, some people can do this and are as productive as they were. Other people are not. But more or less, I think this has changed the way that we're going to work in the future, no matter what happens. If there was a vaccine tomorrow, I don't know that, I think this whole process of construction projects are designed typically by having weekly meetings, and these meetings are gigantic because of, for a sizable project, there could be as many as 20 or 25 people in the meeting. The architect, all of the engineering disciplines, the builders, the client and his representatives. I think that's going to change.
I mean, you mentioned that architects are sort of general practitioners, and the design process. It's part of it is learning what you need to learn, or figuring out new things, peeling that skin of an onion. I guess talk a little bit about in the coming months and even years, what are some of the things that architects might have to start to familiarize themselves with that perhaps they haven't in the past?
Well, the first thing in general is how to apply the social distancing requirements to the physical environment. And people have responded empirically, putting plastic shields in stores or separating people. But in the long run, maybe we need better answers. I don't know what those answers are going to be. I think the key to the key to how things are going to be done is very much dependent on how quickly there will be a vaccine. If in fact there will be a vaccine fairly quickly, it could be that after 9/11 it took a while, but things went back pretty much the way they were. And people being people, there's a very real possibility that if this doesn't last for an extended period of time, that we're going to forget about this. And by the time the next pandemic comes around, we're going to be in exactly the same shape. So that really is the question. So number one is separation. Number two is how do you know? How do you find out if people are actually, are infected or aren't infected? How do you keep people who aren't healthy from coming to the office, and making people think in that way is a completely new challenge. So I think all of these things will lead to either significant changes that are going to affect our physical environment for a long period of time, or not. I don't know which one it's going to be.
So talk about the role then, I guess, in the relatively near term, or even just in general, of the role of architects as advisors to their clients. I mean, their clients, people who own and run these buildings, have to make a number of decisions, and they probably look to a number of different experts. How does how do the architects kind of fit into that mix?
When you think about it, certain things like it's easy to keep people apart. You just have less people in the office, so you have a bigger office. And then you can, you have to figure out how you're going to do that. But for example, how do you keep people safe in an elevator? And in a city like New York, using elevators is unavoidable. I've been thinking about that. I don't particularly have an answer, because in a big building, trying to say that you're going to only let 2 people onto an elevator, I mean, that could work for a couple of days. But, for any period of time, it's almost an impossibility. I don't have the answers to that. It's such a basic, simple problem, and there are a lot of different sort of confined spaces that are similar, where we're going to have similar problems. So, I think the scientists have to tell us whether, wearing masks in an elevator is sufficient. Probably not. So I don't know. Maybe it's a question of you have to introduce something in elevators that kind of continually disinfect the air. Or maybe it's maybe it's ultraviolet light. So we're at the infancy of how we're going to tackle these things.
So I guess what should the mindset be, and especially as it relates to people who are relatively new in the field, 5 years or so. How should they be kind of viewing themselves, or how should they be positioning themselves, or communicating their value, what they offer to their clients?
Well, I think that for young people, this may be an easier adjustment. Number one, they are more tuned to technology, and but it's like anything else. Unfortunately, in order to get somebody to listen to what you're saying, they have to have confidence in you that what you're saying is based on real experience. Young people have a tough time with that. Mm-hmm. Now, I have met young people that within 6 months or a year to become much more competent than somebody who's been working for 20 years. But you could have asked me that on any subject in relationship to the architectural profession. How do young people tackle that? I think that my advice to young architects is become proficient in the entire range of this profession. One of the problems with this, and that make this profession so difficult, is that architecture is one of the few fields that combine the technical and the artistic. And typically, people who are artistic can't add, and people who are, very good in those kind of things, they don't know how to hold a pencil, which is, I'm just showing my age by using that analogy. But unfortunately, also in this profession, the only people that get any recognition are the so-called, fancy designers. And in fact, the technical aspects of this profession probably occupies the overwhelming majority of your day. And my advice to architects is, of course, never lose your design sensitivity, but become as technically proficient as possible. Learn exactly what it is that your consultants are doing, so that you can tell consultants what you want them to do, rather than them telling you how they're going to do it. And I think that holds true for the same thing today.
So, and when you say become proficient, especially on the technical side, so that means in various areas like air handling or
mechanical,
right?
All of you see, they are almost innumerable amounts of things that go into the construction of a building. That's why it takes so many multiple disciplines. But the only profession that looks at the entire picture are architects.
And so they have to know, how everything kind of works together. Like
absolutely,
making adjustments on one side will affect.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, how do they do that? Obviously, they were in their school, but is it a matter of continuing education, or just being curious, or what would you recommend?
Well, I mean, you learn by doing,
right?
And but it also takes a certain mentality to want to do that. When I went to school, if you were good on the engineering side, you would hide that, because that was nobody. You were a dumb engineer. And that's very, very problematic and very, very wrong. So I believe that becoming proficient in all of the technical aspects and striving for technical excellence, in addition to design sensitivity and design excellence, that creates a whole person.
Okay, so I guess thinking about the types of spaces that you work on, and or even just types of public spaces, basically anything other than single family residential. What do you see changing, and what do you see perhaps not changing in the short term? You mentioned before that long term it's anybody's guess at this point, but in the short term, what do you see kind of changes in places like office spaces and public buildings?
I think in the short term, things are going to be, ersatz, homemade. And you're going to have a lot of quick, practical solutions that different people will do in different ways to accomplish what they need to accomplish. And that is basically two basic things: physical separation and cleanliness. That's what's going to happen in the immediate future. How that's going to, I don't think that's going to change things physically to a great extent, because we're talking about professional fields where people are capable of working remotely. If you're in a field where you can't work remotely, I don't have any answers. But I think that people will do things instinctively, which is more or less what we're doing. Our office is a fixed physical size, so we can't make the office grow, but we can reduce the number of people who are there. And that's what we're going to do. Because people work together in teams, how that's going to work. I mean, these are all issues that we're just addressing them hypothetically.
Mm-hmm.
Do we bring a team together twice a week? Do we not? How do we do that? I mean, it's all going to be trial and error.
Okay.
But I think the day of the big meeting is over. So that's a major, probably biggest physical effect about how most professional, I'm not only talking about architects, but most professional firms are going to operate. I think reducing travel is something that's going to happen. These are all immediate responses to trying to contain this virus or minimize its spread until we have a solution. We don't have a solution until there's a vaccine. So that's my answer.
Okay. I guess, I mean, the last question I have is, what advice do you have for young architects or even architects in general, kind of in the next, I guess 6 months or so, in terms of how they position themselves to their clients and kind of show their value and what they do?
Well, first of all, they have to in themselves develop the expertise that they have something to offer. Mm-hmm. Just because they're architects doesn't mean anybody is going to listen to them. So, I mean, the step number one is build your knowledge base in terms of what's going on and think carefully about what the possible answers are, or at least what the possible mitigating factors could be. Without that, you got nothing to say, you got nothing to offer. So that's what I would advise.
Okay. Anything else? Any other topics that you would want to cover today?
Well, not unless you want to lead me somewhere.
Okay. Well, those are all the questions that I had. So I appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.